Sixth grade lesson 5.2 continues on working on percents, and today we're going to learn how to write percents as fractions and as decimals. As fractions is I think you'll find pretty easy because you really are just going to employ a tool you've already used before when we were learning about fractions and how to reduce fractions. So the information from previous lessons where you were writing the percent as a ratio combined with how to reduce fractions put together will show you how to write a percent as a fraction. So let's look at an example. All right, so let's look at 25%. That is a ratio, as you learned in the last lesson. It really just means 25 for every 100, or 25 100ths, 25 out of 100. 25% means 25 out of 100. Okay, now that is now a fraction. Great. We could say, oh, we're done. It's a fraction. I'm good. We could, but remember, usually when we're dealing with fractions, they want that in simplified form or in reduced form. So I'm just going to look at these two numbers and see, is there a number that divides evenly into both of them? I notice they both end in 5, so I know 5 will. However, I also notice, because I'd like to go divide the biggest number out of them, I also notice, because I know money so well, that 25, like quarters in money, it would take 4 of them to make 100. So I do know that 25 divides evenly into both 25 and also into 100 because my knowledge of money. So I'm going to divide 25 out of both of these. It stays equivalent because I'm doing the same to both the numerator and the denominator, but it will reduce it down to its simplified form. 25 divided by 25 is 1, and 100 divided by 25 is 4. So in order to write a percent as a fraction, you would simply take the percent, write it as a ratio to 100, and then simplify it however you need to simplify it if it can be reduced. Some of them may not be able to be reduced. That happens too. But if it's reducible, then you reduce it and you're done, and that's it. Let's look at a couple of examples. So the first part of this Unlock the Problem wants us just to write these as fractions, simplified fractions. So again, just like I showed you in the previous example, we will write it as a ratio to 100 and then simplify it. And that's all the steps we need to do. Here they went ahead and modeled it for you. 15% is 15 out of 100, 15 out of 100, and now it's a fraction. Now I just want to simplify it so I can look at that and think, what number will divide evenly into both 15 and also 100? Well, again, I see that this ends in 5, this ends in 0, and I know that 5 goes into, when I count by 5s, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, they either end in 5 or they end in 0. So that's a big sign to me saying, okay, I could divide both of these by 5. Just be sure you're doing the same to the numerator as you are to the denominator. 15 divided by 5 is 3. And 100 divided by 5 is 20. And there is 15% written as a fraction in simplest form. 3 out of 20. 3 out of every 20 is the same as 15%, or 15 out of 100. Same amount. All right. What happens when you get something like this? 113. Remember, because that's more than 100. So let's have a looky at that. All right, so let's have a look at this part B, writing 113% as a fraction, because that has a little bit of a twist to it. It still involves the same steps, but there's a little bit of a twist, and it's just that it's just getting your brain to see what happens. So they went ahead and said, let's write 113% as a fraction, as a ratio. And we normally would put 113% over 100 here. But remember, last lesson, 113 is spilling over the 100. We have 100 here and then 13 more in another 100 block. So let's go ahead and split these apart and say this is 100 plus 13. So we have the full amount here, 100, plus the 13 here out of 100. So 100 100ths would be a whole thing, plus what's left of 13 100ths out of the next one. So this is the full. This is 13 out of 100 from another one because we spilled over. Well, 100 divided by 100 is 1, right? That's one whole, and we can see that it is one whole block. So we can just write that as one whole. And then our answer then, and then we would take a look at this 13/100ths to see if it's reducible. If I can simplify it, there's nothing that goes into both 13 but also 100. So I can't reduce it, so that's fine. Then I just go ahead and write my answer as 1 and 13/100ths. I just write it as a mixed number. So if you notice that your percent is more than 100, then break them apart so you have 100 100ths, or if there's a lot more, then however many 100 100ths you need in order to make those full ones. And then whatever's left over you can leave as a fraction, simplify it if it's possible, and then leave it here as a mixed number. Let's look at another one like it, just so that you can see what I mean there. Let's say for some odd reason I have 250% of something. I can't even think of a scenario where that would happen, but let's say we have that. So I am going to put, I'm always out of 100, right? Let's not put equal there. I mean to put plus there. Okay. Let's take 100 out of here to fill this 100 out of 100. I still have 150 of those left, so that's a whole nother full 100. So there is 200 out of the 100, and then I have 50 left out of 100. So I just really broke that 250 apart into 100ths pieces, and then whatever was left. That is one whole, that is two whole. And then the fractional amount, 50 100ths, I can divide those by 10 to shrink them down, to simplify. That'll give me 5/10. And actually, I can still reduce that because both of these are divisible by 5, and I get 1/2. So if you get something odd like that, 250%, pull your full amounts, 100 out of 100 out, 100 out of 100 out, and then what's left of it, 2 and 1/2. Hey, and here's just a little something that kind of spills into what the next part of this lesson will do. If you don't see a decimal in a number, you know it's kind of hanging out in the shadows. If I'm dividing by 100, boom, once over, boom, once over, that is 2.5. And if you remember, 5 dimes is half a dollar. That is 2 and 1/2. Just kind of throwing something out there at you that's coming your way in this lesson coming up. Before we get to that though, let's talk about this blueberry muffin at 0.5%. That has a little twist to it too. This one had a twist. This one was pretty easy. I think you guys found that one was okay. This one had a little twist to it, but I think you're okay with it now. What about this guy? Let's have a look at him. All right, so I have this 0.5%. Well, let's start by writing it as a ratio because we're comfortable with that. So we're going to go ahead and put the 0.5 out of 100 because that's what 0.5% means. We tend to like to have decimals out of our way, so we know that if we don't see a decimal, it's at the end of the number. So in this case, I'm going to try and move this decimal to the end of the number, and I can do that by multiplying by 10. I'm not allowed to just say, oh, multiply by 10 here and then continue. If I'm going to multiply by 10 to my numerator, I have to be fair and multiply by 10 to my denominator. Same as when I am reducing fractions. This time I'm increasing. It's still equivalent as long as I do the same to the top as I do to the bottom. So I'll multiply by 10 to move that decimal over because I need to move it over one spot. If I needed to move it over 2 spots, I would multiply by 100. If I needed to move it over 3 spots, I would multiply by 1,000. The amount of zeros would be how many times I move it, right? Only one spot, 1 0, I multiply by 10. Multiply by 10 here, multiply by 10 here. That is going to be 0.5 times 10 will be 5. That moved my decimal over the one spot and out of my way. But I also had to do the same here. 100 times 10, toss that 0 right on the end there, 1,000. And so 0.5% is 1/1000. Let's look at just one more like that one. Let's look at 0.2%. Let's write that as a ratio to 100, 0.2 100ths. Well, I really don't like this decimal sitting there, and that's fine because I have enough math skills to know how to move it. I want to move it this way. That's the multiply direction. I'm going to multiply times 10 to get it to the end of this number and out of my way. Only if I'm going to multiply this by 10, I must also multiply this by 10, which would move the hidden decimal here one spot over as well. So multiply by 10 to both, and I'm going to get 2 1,000ths. It really just moved the decimal once here and from this hidden spot here once there. It's simplifiable. Oh, that's not a word, is it? It's reducible. It can be simplified because both of these are even numbers. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 1,000 divided by 2, or 1,000 cut in half, is 500. So there's that if you have the ability to reduce it as well. So so there was a little second example on that. By the way, that's number 3 on your share and show if you wanted to use that. The next part of this lesson is talking about how to change percents into decimals. And before we even get to that point, I want to just refresh some memories on a couple of things. So I want to talk about place values to the right of the decimals. Remember, so to the left we have the ones place, tens place, hundreds place, like you learned that a long time ago and it's probably really ingrained in your head. Thousands place, 10,000s place, 100,000s place, millions place, and all that. On this side of the decimal, again, just to remind you, we start with the tenths place. You can think of that in terms of dimes. Dimes are 10 cents, and that's where we put dimes when we talk about money. That's the tenths place. And then the pennies place is the hundredths place. And then you keep going in that pattern if you need to remember that. Thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths, millionths. And you always put the THS on the end, and you try not to spit on people while you're saying those. But we're just going to focus on the tenths and mostly the hundredths place, because remember, our percents are out of 100, the hundredths place. So if I have a number like 25%, we've been writing that as a ratio of 25 to 100, and that can be said as 25 hundredths. That's how you would say that, 25 hundredths. You may not put as much emphasis on the ths, but 25 hundredths. Remember when we talked about ratios and there were 3 ways to write it? Well, there's 2 ways to write 25 hundredths. You can write 25 hundredths. 3 ways, I guess, technically. I can write it as word, 25 hundredths. I'll make it short there, hundredths. Or you can write it as a 25 that ends in that hundredths place value, 25 hundredths. This can be read as 25 hundredths, 25 hundredths, 25 hundredths is how you would read this decimal. So that's one way, is knowing that that's 25 ending in the hundredths place, 25 hundredths. So keep that in mind as we go into this next part. So their first example, example A, says to write 72% as a decimal. Well, by now you're probably very comfortable saying, okay, that's 72 out of 100 as a ratio. 72 out of 100 is what they say here. They even model it for us. Out of 100, there's 72 shaded. They said use the place value to write 72 hundredths as a decimal. So this is 0.72 that ends in the hundredths place. So we would call this 72 hundredths. We would also call this 72 hundredths. That's how you say those numbers. So as a decimal, you can write it as 0.72. So if I had a number like 80%, I would want to write 80 so that the last number of it ends in the hundredths place. There it is. That's that as a decimal. All right, and so let's take a look at another way they show us. We have 4% equals 4 over 100. This part of it you guys are experts at by now. 4% is 4 out of 100. And if you recall, a fraction, like we have here, is simply a number over a number. So fractions are also known as division problems. So one option we have is to divide 4 divided by 100. 4 divided by 100. And of course, at first you're going to say, you know, that won't go. 100 doesn't fit into 4, right? So we'll put a decimal. We can put that 0 there just to hold our place to make sure we don't mess things up. And then we will put that lifesaver that you throw into the water to save the drowning people. That 0 is the lifesaver to save the drowning. 4, 100 into 40, still, doesn't go. So I will throw another lifesaver in there to save it. And 100 into 400 is 4. And you notice we really end up here. We'll go ahead and put this over here. And we end up with 0.04. And what's going to happen is if you do this time and time again, you're going to start recognizing, well, let's do it time and time again. Let me show you. Okay, so I went ahead and did the calculations. We had 72 divided by 100, 72 divided by 100. And of course it didn't go. Do the decimal, the lifesaver to save it. 100 goes into 727 times. That gives me 700. With 20 left over, bring down the 0, 100 into 200, 2 times with nothing left over. Notice it just moved the decimal from here to there because I divided by 100, 2 zeros. It moved it 2 spots, 2 spots. I did another one, 17 divided by 100, 17 divided by 100. Decimal, 0, 100 goes into 170 one time. It gives me 100. Subtract, I get 70, throw down a 0, 100 into 700, 7 times to give me 700 and nothing left over. Where the decimal was here, it moved 2 spots and 2 spots only to there. Anytime you're dividing by 100, you're moving the decimal 2 spots to the left because there are 2 zeros there. It's just moving the decimal. So, keeping that in mind, I'm going to take us on to the next part of this lesson. So that information becomes handy to know when you get ones that look like this, because then I'd have all kinds of division going on, and it's not necessary for me to divide, because remember, when you divide decimal numbers by powers of 10, like 10, 100, 1,000, and etc., you move the decimal point one place to the left for each factor of 10, or basically each 0 to the left. So if I have 25.81%, the ratio is still, of course, 25.81, and I would be dividing 25.81 by 100, which really, remember, is just going to move my decimal 2 spots to the left and is going to give me 0.2581 because I moved this decimal 2 spots, 1, 2, to the left because I was dividing by 100. Dividing by 100. So 25.81% is 0.2581. So the easiest way to write a percent as a decimal is just to know that it's always the ratio out of 100. It's always divide by 100. So no matter what percent you have, if you want it as a decimal, move your decimal 2 spots and 2 spots only to the left because you're dividing by 100. It's always out of 100. So let's look at a few. If I have 20%, and you might think, oh no, but there's no decimal here. Every number has a decimal, right? $20 is $20 and decimal 00 cents. I just choose not to put the 00 cents there, right? I just kind of let it hide. So it's 20 with a decimal. If it's at the end of the number, we just kind of ignore it and it's hiding in the shadows there, but it's there. So it's 20 decimal. So you can make your decimal show up. Let's make that decimal show up. Now, 20% is 20 out of 100, so I would divide by 100 and simply move my decimal 2 spots and 2 spots only to make it a decimal. 20% as a decimal is 0.20. 45% as a decimal, show that decimal up, move it 2 spots and 2 spots only, and you're going to get 0.45 or just 0.45. You can put the zeros on there. Something to watch out for is something like 5%. The error that's commonly made, there's my decimal, right? I need to move my decimal 2 spots and 2 spots only. And I see a lot of people go, okay, I've moved it and there's no more else to move it, so there I'm done. No, we can create that spot. We need to create that spot. I need it to go 2 spots, 0.05. And then just like the example they gave us there, if I have, let's say I have 2.37%, I'm moving that decimal 2 spots. Oops, there's not enough. Create one. 0.0237. So changing a percent to a fraction was easy. You wrote it as the ratio with 100 and reduced it or simplified it. Changing it from a percent to a decimal is even easier because I just need to divide by 100, and that means moving my decimal to the left 2 times and 2 times only. Make sure it's 2 times though. Like on this one, we wanted to stop, and no, I need that second time, 2 times. So that's all you do for changing to decimal. It'll take a little bit of time to get it stuck into your brain that it works there. But once you get used to that, you have full control of percents changing to decimals. Good luck with that. I know you're going to do great.